Okay, so we're back. Give everyone a second. And the reason I wanted to do these two videos is I wanted to have one with the silly little fun fox on, talking about the giveaway a little bit quickly, and then I wanted to do a serious video. So this is going to be a serious shadow work discussion video. This is a little bit more in depth. This is a little bit more to do with spirituality and shadow work. So this is probably going to be a bit of a longer video. I will warn everybody now, I have Viking music in my ears, so I can't hear the neighbours stamping around and screaming. I apologise in advance if anyone can hear them. I'm hoping not, but it distracts me to all hell trying to do these videos with them making a racket. So I've got my, so if I start going halfway through the video, you all know why. But that being said, I really wanted to talk about something that I have been personally working through, and I've been noticing other people have been dealing with it. And this is shadow work, shadows of justification. And this is self-justification. And for me, it comes through working in a spiritual business. Oh, I'm glad you guys can't hear them. All I can still hear them over the Viking music, like boom, boom, boom. It's all hours of the day as well, like 4 in the morning. It's ridiculous. I don't know what's going on recently. Anyway, so shadows of justification is, for me, largely linked with spiritual business, but it can be to do with other areas of spirituality. And what shadows of justification looks like is when you continuously are sort of handing over your power and justifying why it is you are doing what you are doing, spiritually speaking, or spiritual business speaking, to other people. And it's kind of looking outside of yourself for confirmation in a number of ways. I was always a little bit on the fence about the people who's like, when you get to a certain point in spirituality, you don't give a fuck about that anymore. And I don't agree with the wording of that specifically, because I think that's kind of hostile. And when you're being hostile in, I don't give a fuck about what this person says, that to me says somewhere underneath that you do care. Otherwise you wouldn't be so aggressive about it, would you? You wouldn't be so annoyed or angry or any of the rest of it. So what happens after a certain point, though, is you get on board with yourself. You get on board with your path, and you get on board with how much you believe it, and you realize that nobody can give you what you are looking for when you are trying to justify this path. And the thing of it is there's a little bit of understanding that comes through with why people attack people of certain spiritual denominations, people in spiritual business. There's a whole host of reasons. But the main thing to remember is people who attack have an agenda, have a reason to be doing this. And it's usually a self-serving from a low place. It's not from a good place, almost never. People will try and justify it in terms of morality and moral arguments, but moral arguments don't embody the essence of damaging another person, tearing another person down, trying to ruin another person just because you don't like their spirituality or what they're doing. And I have to be careful with this, because there are people who use this and then kind of flip it for their own motivations as well. So there are people who will be like, come at it like, oh, I'm going to come across your borders. I'm going to like, it's very difficult to explain, but when we have personal boundaries in spiritual services or in spirituality, somebody's trying to cross that boundary, somebody's trying to do something which is unethical on some straight, they will then try and use that argument against you, that you're trying to stop them from being the spiritual person that they want to be. And you have to be very careful in this. But what ultimately comes through with shadows of justification is you get to a place in yourself where you know this is your medicine. This is your fire. This is what you were put on this planet to do. And the people who are trying to destroy that don't have any impact. They don't have any influence. They don't have any effect, because you're self-assured enough in the energies of what it is you are creating, what you're speaking, what you are talking about, what you're putting out there into the world. So I will have people come after me all the time trying to pull me down about my spiritual business. And this is something that happens to people who are in heart-centered business, spiritual business, all across the board, you know, tarot readers, people with stores, people hitting microphones. I always hit this microphone, even though I've put it out of the way. It's talking with my hands like this under the screen. So the problem with that is that it can get you down, it can leave you feeling insecure, and unfortunately it kind of pulls on wounds that we already have pre-existing. And those, yeah, why not? Why not slam on the floor like a crazy person, arsehole? Anyway, it's making me so angry. It's been 3 or 4 days of just non-stop noise. Anyway, so the people trying to tear you down, the people trying to stop you, and when you're looking outside of yourself for people to hold you up, people to give you confidence, people to truly like make you feel better about this situation, it gets problematic. Because as I was saying in lessons of being a queen, things I've learned about the queen archetype, of sovereignty and assurity, is that ultimately the only person who's going to truly have your back when it comes to how you present yourself to the world is yourself. That's not to say you can't enjoy people's company. That's not to say you can't rely on people. That's not to say you won't have people in conjunction who you can trust. The problem of it is when the chips are really freaking down hard to the wire, the person that you can count on utterly and completely is yourself. And I've seen a lot of people recently who've been constantly looking outside of themselves for confirmation of what it is that they are doing. And the problem with that is if you're not assured enough in what it is you're doing, that when people are coming and saying you shouldn't be doing it or attacking it, if you are like saying basically to yourself, I don't know if I should be doing this, and then like look outside of yourself, it's really problematic with regards to spirituality and spiritual business. Because spirituality, that's a personal thing, but spiritual business for a large part is providing services of heart and soul to other people, and you have to be authentic in that. You have to believe in that. And I understand the difference for myself, or I'm beginning to understand the difference in that authenticity and being territorial. So when people are trying to ruin it for you versus like people trying to undermine what you believe in. So there is a difference, and it's an unfortunate distinction between types of manipulation outside of the self. It can be really difficult to deal with. And so I've really been looking at that lately, these kind of shadows of justification, these reasons that we keep looking outside of ourselves. And I'm like, you cannot share messages of empowerment if you are looking outside of yourself all the time to be empowered. Because if you cannot pick yourself up, then how can we pick anyone else up? Kind of thing. Like we're allowing other people to rest on something. Now, that's not to say that the person in the spiritual center of this has to be perfect, because no such a thing exists. This isn't to say that they can't have bad days, low moments, breakdowns. They can't have pain and suffering and struggle, because that's something else that has come into this consideration recently, is people who should be sharing their spiritual message because they have a strong medicine to share with the world, they have a strong gift to share with the world, and you can tell those are the people that probably doubt themselves more. And that's less about necessarily the outside influence, but rather than the internal shadow, the internal voice that can be influenced by people outside of the self, but ultimately it comes from within. And I think the strongest people for sharing spiritual messages or spiritual businesses based on their spiritual message have that sense of self all the time. They're constantly questioning. Now that can be really, really beneficial in terms of spirituality, always questioning everything, looking at the world around us, challenging the preconceived notions, standing up for people who we feel that need standing up for. But unfortunately, we tend to turn that lens in on ourselves, and then we kind of like, should I be doing this? Do I have the right to do this? I'm still kind of broken in these ways. I'm still suffering in these ways. I'm still working through this shadow in this way. Do I have the right to be then talking about spirituality or teaching or whatever it is that the person wants to do outside of the self? And for me, I think there's a balance. Like if you're truly in a place where you cannot cope and you're constantly looking outside of the self, and you know everything is just falling under the feet like rotten wood, then no, you're probably not in a position where you want to be sharing spiritual messages outside of the self, because basically you're trying to fill a need. You're basically trying to cope with your own shiz by telling other people what to do, and it rings a little bit hollow. However, there is nothing wrong with going through the cycles yourself, going through the difficulties, going through the pain, going through the emotional responses, going through the shadow work, and then sharing that experience with other people, then talking about that experience with other people. In fact, I would say that is true authenticity, because you've been there. You felt it. You know what it looks like. You know what it sounds like. You know what it smells like. You've seen patterns of behavior. That's not to say you can tell everyone how they will react, because people are different. But you have the authenticity that you have lived and breathed that situation, that pain, that difficulty, that whatever it is, that shadow, that you can then hopefully shine a little light out into the world and be like, if this helps somebody, great. I'm not telling anybody that this is the way, because I think anyone being like, now I've got do you know the way in my head, but anyone telling anyone that this is the way to do things, run 100 miles in the other direction, because anybody who is that needs to control people in that respect, run. Because if you're truly balanced at an equilibrium within itself, you don't need to tell people how to live their lives. You know that the only control that you could truly have is over yourself, and how you behave and how you interact, and what you allow and what you don't allow, and what's okay and what's not okay. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is fluid. So there's something that's been rattling around my head recently with regards to like the feminist argument and feminism, and how people there are people very, very against feminism, and there are people who are very ranty with feminism. And it occurred to me that this, as with all ideologies, is fluid depending on the person who's interacting with it. Like, there isn't necessarily a set ideology because of how people are interacting with the ideology. The ideology by itself is completely separate, but how people then interact with it, how people reciprocate it, then people kind of recycle it and make it into something else. And this is true for all ideologies, spirituality, and so on and so forth. That the way that we interact with things is very fluid and is very much based on the person and the individual. And so what we're then putting out into the world is kind of like our take. Like, this is how we painted this picture. And if we all paint the picture of the same thing, we'll still get thousands and thousands of different expressions. Some people will be completely off the wall. Some people will show a completely different thing. Some people will be more literal, and etc., etc. It's all about personal experience, personal equilibrium. And when we're constantly looking outside of the self for that kind of balance, that kind of person to, like, Kellyanne was talking about a little bit about this live yesterday. And she said, we're looking for someone to co-sign our dreams. And I thought, that's perfect. That's what people keep doing. People keep asking someone to co-sign on how they want to present themselves to the world, how they feel about their dream, their passion, their career, their whatever it is. And the fact of the matter is that nobody is going to fully endorse you the way that you can endorse yourself. And justification of what you're doing isn't ever going to come. Like saying, oh, remind me that this is my path. Remind me that this is what I want to do. Well, no one can do that for you, not really. And it's difficult when you struggle with things like anxiety and depression, because you can get that really dark voice in your head. And there are times that people who love you, and they will pull you up and say, you know what, this is who you are. I'm going to remind you of who you've said you are, like who you have shown me who you are. And that's a really powerful tool that friends and loved ones can use. They can reflect back at you who they know you are already, because that is your purpose. But when you're kind of putting it out into the world, like, you're putting this doubt into the heads of other people who don't necessarily know you with regards to spirituality, that becomes problematic, because then it's like, well, do you believe in this or not? Do you stand strong in this or not? Is this where you're coming from or not? You don't necessarily have to have all the answers straight away, but at least believe strongly and firmly in what it is that you are putting out, the message that you believe in. I think that's really important. That's not to say the message can't change or the message can't evolve, because people do. People grow, people change. But as long as you are firm in what you believe and sort of acknowledge as you grow, evolve, and change your mind, that's still authentic. There are people out there who are like, you can't change your mind, or that's inauthentic with regards to spirituality. No. Just because a person evolves, a person changes their mind, a person grows, doesn't make them less authentic. And unfortunately, there are people out there who just want to tear people down. They just want to destroy what people are doing. They have nothing better to do, I guess. And unfortunately, these people come in spades, people telling people that things should be free, people telling them they don't have a right. And to be honest, when anyone's ever like, you don't have the right to do something in spirituality, I immediately switch off and walk out, because I'm not interested. Like, people don't get to tell you that you don't have the right to believe, that you don't have a right to worship, that you don't have a right to dance, you don't have a right to sing, speak. Basically, share your medicine with the world, and whatever form that takes. That's really important to me. I think that's a really important lesson. It is sovereignty, and it comes though because these shadows of justification are really, really strong with regards to when people feel that they need other people to pat them on the back and tell them what they're doing is right. And that to me takes away from any messages of strength going forward. So if I was to like present myself in a position of, I don't know if this is what I should be doing, God damn it, publicly, and then on the next breath I'm like, sovereignty, strength, and we can change the world, we can do this, people are going to be conflicted about which message I believe in. So everybody has moments of self-doubt, and that's perfectly natural, normal, and absolutely fine. And I'm not saying that it's a bad thing to doubt yourself at any point, because I think that helps the individual to evaluate, reevaluate, keep looking at themselves and keep growing, and like search for the process of growth. And it's good to have people who you can trust and rely on to help you and give you perspective in those moments, and support, of course. But when it's kind of like always external, always outside of the self, then the problem is that you're not really growing from that moment. You're like looking for a quick fix, like, oh, this person thinks I'm great, so I'm having a moment of feeling quick fixed. And unfortunately, that's what looking outside of the self often does. When people are constantly looking outside of the self, it's kind of like a rush. It's kind of like the social media drug that has become an awareness in recent times in psychology, that people get a rush of endorphins from likes and comments and interactions and things to do with social media. It's like, oh, they love me, they really love me, and I can keep, and unfortunately, that's really not very healthy. From a self-esteem point of view, all that's going to do is put you right back at square one. And I know, because I've been there, and I've felt it, and I know what it looks like. And unfortunately, we keep looking outside of the self, then we don't learn to get strong on the inside. We don't learn to get to the position of, this is mine, this is my medicine, this is who I am, this is what I believe in, this is worth sharing to the world, this is worth fighting for, no matter what anyone says. And I'll tell you something as well, that the people who have really ultimately changed the world have been called crazy, been called names, or every step of human evolution, because they go against the grain. They stand for what they believe in, and they push for change. And there will always be haters. There will always be people telling you can't, people trying to drag you down, people trying to stop you from living authentically in your truth. And that, by the way, is the key point between with people who use this argument to like justify shitty behavior versus people who really just want to do what it is that they are here to do, share what they're here to share. The people who innovate and create rather than replicate. So the people who create, innovate, elevate, it's like a three-part friggin' cheerleading thing. Innovate, elevate, and create. But it's positive, and it's from the internal, and it's from your connection to divinity, and it's an expression of who you are. Excuse me, I've been talking for nearly 20 minutes and I forgot to put any water on the desk. And I think that's really important, to embrace those energies and really present who you are to the world without expectation of approval and without taking criticism to heart, which is a really tough lesson. The thing is that we live in a world where we put all this effort in, we put things out, and we live in a world that takes pleasure in criticizing, and not for a good reason usually. So there is positive criticism, there is constructive criticism, there is those who will like look at what you've done and try and help you to improve and suggest the benefit of their experience. But there are people very assuredly who will thumbs down, who will hate, who will just give you a load of grief because they get off on it, because they get power from it, because they get a kick from it, and because they're not creating usually, because all they do is sit there and tear down. And it's an unfortunate truth that those people will try and put a negative spin on what you do. And if you live in that space of looking for justification outside of the self, you will never truly find it, because the voices of the haters and people like that are always going to be stronger than the people who are like positive. Like some people might really love it, but they might not want to say so, they might feel embarrassed, blah blah blah. Unfortunately, the people who like to hate are very loud about it and are unabashed about it, and sometimes they have the anonymity of the internet to hide behind most of the time, so it provides them with a safety net. So what can we do? We go from the inside and we trust and believe in what it is that we're doing, because if we're justifying it, we're giving away our power, we're handing it away. We're saying, you tell me I'm worth it. Well, no, you tell yourself you're worth it. Are you worth it? And honestly, I think that's where strength comes from. Remembering that you are worth your dreams. Remembering that what you are here to do will fill you with a passion, will fill you with a joy, and you can control that. You can put that out into the world. You can be your talent, your creativity, your elevation. So that's going to be it for this video, because we're at about the 20-minute mark, and I feel good about that. I don't want to go on for another 20 minutes with it being a live and whatnot. So thank you very much, guys. Yeah. So Kendra says, before we finish, I see like shattered mirrors. When you stand in your own, you reflect those pieces of themselves that pokes their shadow and they don't like it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So there is that element. But ultimately, we can sit here and we can kind of explain some of the reasons people do this, but it doesn't truly help us in the end. To try and understand is a good thing, but if we keep trying to justify the behavior of others, it just gets us lost along the path. And rather than doing that, we can be like, I respect your right to the opinion, but I don't have to have your opinion in my house. And that's it. So there you go. Thank you for watching, guys. Many blessings. See you soon.